No big intro, we're jumping right into it. This is the Falkner deck. We are starting with Hoot Hoot. I know Falkner's ace is Pidgeotto, but there are no Pidgeylines here. The Pidgeylines in Neon are not great, though they are an option that we'll discuss at the end of the video. I thought that the Noctowl line was a little more representative of Johto, especially as the first gym leader that you encounter. So we got a full playset of that Genesis Hoot Hoot, one copy of the Sky Ridge Noctowl that is pretty unique in that it actually lets you look at your prize cards as well as the top cards of your deck, the top cards of your opponent's deck. And then we're going to have two copies of the Genesis Noctowl just for its utility ability to remove trainer cards from your opponent's hand. So it's a little bit of disruption, it's a little bit of control, and that's what this deck is kind of going for here. It's got a bunch of different utility cards that can all play off of one another, while at the same time having a lot of low cost attacks to just ping your opponent over and over and over again. Doduo from Legendary Collection is no exception to that. With free retreat and a pretty decent 1 energy attack, Doduo is one of the better Pokemon to start with when you're beginning a game with this Falkner deck. On top of the Legendary Collection Doduo, I'm going to use one copy of Legendary Collection Dodrio just for its retreat aid. Most of the other Pokemon in this deck either have free retreat or a retreat cost of 1. So it's going to bring it down to 0, allowing you to swap back and forth between your Pokemon as much as you need to. A couple copies of Aquapolis Dodrio as well, just for those low energy attacks that can pack a punch, especially that peck attack. No matter what coin flips you hit, you're actually getting some pretty good value for only 2 colorless energy. Flip 2 coins, if one is heads you deal 20 damage, if both are heads you deal 50 damage, and if 0 are heads, the defending Pokemon is now confused. Falkner's pool of Pokemon doesn't include just birds, we also get to use Genesis Gligar here. It has a really good Poison Sting attack. This is a pretty good Haymaker card for the Neon era where you don't have a whole lot of Haymakers. For 1 fighting energy, you're dealing 10 damage with the possibility of poison, which would be a minimum of 20 damage, and the option of forcing your opponent to switch, which you have the advantage in since most of your Pokemon are going to have free retreat. Speaking of Haymakers and switching, Farfetch is another great basic Pokemon. Its Whirlwind attack is just a gust effect on your opponent's side of the field, and Leak Rush can deal infinite damage. And then the last Pokemon is going to be Skarmory, which is going to be your tank for this deck. Because it's a steel type, it can fully utilize the benefits of metal energy, and agility can just straight up prevent everything your opponent is going to try to do to Skarmory on their next turn. On top of that, it does provide some type coverage just in case you're up against an electric type deck. Nearly every bird in this deck is going to be weak to electric, but Skarmory is weak to fire instead. You also get a little bit of that coverage with Gligar because it's weak to grass. But almost completely across the board, you're going to be getting resistance to fighting, which in a theme deck format can be very useful since that's going to cover you from ground type, rock type, and fighting type theme decks. Because the build is mostly basic Pokemon, Pokemon Fan Club is gonna be essential for you, and it's gonna make it really easy to get the Pokemon you need for the situational matchup that you're up against. For the draw power, we've got 3 copies of Professor Elm, which early game, you're not gonna mind ending your trainer use at a Professor Elm just because it's gonna be get a basic Pokemon into play, attach an energy, and you're gonna be good to go because your attacking Pokemon only need 1 or 2 energy except for Skarmory, but Skarmory is going to be a later game swap in just to tank those hits and stall your opponent out a bit. A lot of the draw power in Neon is a little bit interchangeable just depending on your preference. For this deck, I just went with Bill's Teleporter. I think it has a lot more power to it, even though it does rely on coin flips. And then I gotta include a full playset of Double Gust because gusting, birds, you know. But Double Gust also emphasizes the maneuverability all of your Pokemon are going to have. With that 1 Dodrio in play, everything's going to have free retreat, except for Skarmory. But again, that's going to be your mid to late game Pokemon. And so you're just going to be able to gust out your opponent's Pokemon, hopefully get one stuck in the active position while you ping it with whatever Pokemon you want. It's going to be your choice to keep all of your Pokemon alive long enough to actually get KOs. We've got Goldberry in here, as well as a playset of Focus Band just because these Pokemon are a bit fragile, and because they're only hitting for 10, 20, maybe even 50 damage at a time if you can hit the coins right on that Dodrio, they do need to last long enough to stack damage. So I got 3 copies of Metal Energy in here for those Skarmories, but they can be attached to any other Pokemon to get that tankiness. It's just there are going to be the downsides of reducing the damage that you're actually dealing. In a lot of cases, it's actually going to reduce it to 0, so it's not going to be a great idea. Full playset of Recycle Energy just to take full advantage of everything you can do for colorless energy in this deck. And then the deck is going to get topped off by Fighting Energy. Not just to meet the requirements for Gligar, but also to reflect the TM move that you get from Falkner. You get Mud Slap, so Fighting Energy is kind of the closest you get to that. When you first encounter Falkner in Silver, Gold, Crystal, I think the point of that gym battle is to teach you that there's more to battles than just hitting the attack that's going to deal the most damage. Because Mud Slap is reducing your accuracy, it kind of introduces the player to stat disruption. And that's really the goal here. None of these Pokemon are really doing anything too fancy. You're attaching 1 or 2 energy, attacking for 10 or 20 damage, while also messing with your opponent's hand, making it harder for them to hit you with bigger attacks, gusting them back and forth from their bench into the active position. A simple strategy that does still have its competitive merits. A very fitting style, I think, for Falkner. So what other Pokemon options do you have to swap in to keep with the theme of this Falkner deck? Let's take a look! Of course, there is the Pidgey line, which I mentioned earlier, that gives you a few options, including Stage 2 options. The available Pidgeotos do give you a couple more whirlwinding options, which does fit with the theme of the deck we already have built, gusting a lot on your opponent, dealing those little chips of damage that are going to stack up over time. So Pidgeotto does actually fit pretty well with the deck. I honestly just wanted to free up more space for cards like Farfetch and Dodrio, which had more interesting attacks in my opinion. And including Stage 2 Pokemon like Pidgeot does slow down the deck just a bit, which I did want to avoid with this initial theme deck, since part of its theme is going to be just hitting right out of the gate. You want to be dealing 10-20 damage as soon as possible, stacking up damage as quickly as possible. And the available Pidgeot do detract from that a bit, not only because you have to evolve up into Stage 2s, but because they have some higher energy cost attacks. The Pidgeot from the Southern Island sets can actually deal 40 damage for 2 colorless energy. Pretty good, except that you flip a coin and have a 50% chance of it doing nothing. And then that 50 damage attack is not costed very efficiently at all. You do have the Legendary Collection Pidgeot, which can deal 20 for 2, and then create even more disruption with Hurricane, though it's not necessarily going to help you get KOs. Expedition Pidgeot is going to be dealing 20 for 3 colorless energy with the chance to deal 50 for 3, with a Poke Power that will help deprive your opponent of KOs. If you do want to use any combination of these Pidgeot in your Falkner build, I would suggest removing the Gligar. That way you can also get rid of all of the fighting energy and focus more on the effects of special energy cards that provide colorless energy, like Boost Energy, Cyclone Energy, and your Recycles, because you will be shifting your focus more to evolution Pokemon. You might even want to get rid of those Skarmories. Aside from the big pigeons, our parameters also give us access to Fearow, Togetic, and Delibird, so let's start by looking at our Fearow options. The Legendary Collection Fearow is really only going to be an option if you are leaning into that Boost Energy type build because of the high energy requirements for both of its attacks. As for the Expedition Fearow, I think Clutch is a solid attack. It's just that I would never use Supersonic Flight just because you are potentially wasting your turn on a coin flip. As a Stage 1 bird, I think that both forms of Dodrio are just preferable to both of these Fearow. As for Togetic, you can get into some Metronome shenanigans for only 1 energy off of the Neo Genesis and Aquapolis Prince, but you do have to flip a coin in order to pull those attacks off. On top of that, your mileage is going to vary when it comes to metronoming your opponent, just depending on the matchup. Plus, metronoming seems like more of a Whitney move. The Light Togetic from Neo Block is pretty useful. Sweet Kiss dealing 30 damage for 2 energy is not bad at all, but whenever you play Light Togetic and whenever you attack with it, you're giving your opponent card advantage, so not recommended. When it comes to Delibird, that Revelation print might as well just be a joke card because it's not usable. It's really just a chaos attack that I don't know why you would use it unless it's just to have fun and mess around with your opponent. Skyridge Delibird can search out your gold berries and focus bands for you, but if you want to use its gusting attack and kick away, you are going to have to include some water energy in the deck, which is not very on brand for Falkner. That's one Neon themed deck down and many more to go. If you liked the video, if you like what I do on this channel, then do all the YouTube things. Leave me some comments, like the video, subscribe, share with others that would like the same kind of thing that I do here. I do appreciate you sticking around until the very end, and I hope to see you again throughout this series of videos. Bye.